Hello and a very warm welcome back to The Library is Open. So I hope you brought your library cards, my darlings. Tongue pop. A slight apology and a kind of catch up here to part 2 of my post-Black History Month ponder. So I filmed a load of footage talking about this particular book, which you can now see on screen. We Are Not Like Them by Christine Pride and Joe Piazza. Or Piazza. I do apologise if I'm saying that wrong. So I'm having to play catch up now because I lost the footage, unfortunately. So picking up where we left off, this is a novel published this year. Got my copy from Waterstones. It had some beautiful ombre edges, and this centres around childhood best friends Riley and Jen. It's set in America, and Riley is black and a newscaster, and Jen is white and about to become a mother. She is married to a police officer, and they both live in Philadelphia, and they've been like best friends since the very, very beginning of their lives together. They've sort of grown up together, shared family, shared good times, bad times, etc. And they've sort of drifted apart, but now they're coming back together in that way that you can do with kind of lifelong friends. And what happens is that Jen's husband, the police officer, shoots a young black man apparently in the course of carrying out his duties, and this kicks off, as of course it should, a massive backlash against him and the police department, and really calls into question Riley and Jen's friendship, and they have to renegotiate everything they've ever thought about one another and everything they thought they were kind of beyond. And it really sort of picks up on those issues of race, culture, societal discrimination, and so on and so forth, that can, form a real wedge between a strong relationship, a strong, long-lasting relationship. It asks questions like, are there fundamental differences between people that can't be surmounted? Are there things that the bonds of friendship can't get over? And it's a real ponder. Apparently the authors did a chapter each of the novel. I'm not quite sure how they differentiated which character they were writing. I would be interested in reading that. The Waterstones edition does have an interview, but it doesn't mention it. And what's so great about this book is that it plunges us right back into that messy middle ground where we really have to interrogate our thoughts. We really have to think about, both the macro and the micro expressions of that. And, when times of crisis happen, where do you stand? How do you decide where to stand? Is your position fixed or is it movable? And what are the variables in that? And it's a really powerful indictment of societal and institutional racism, this time specifically in the US, but definitely applicable across the board. So I had a really, really interesting time with this one, and I would definitely encourage you to read it. So we're back in the bathroom for I know, right? Treating you for one of the non-fiction titles I picked up this month. This was actually recommended by Instagram, which makes me really believe in those like algorithms that spy on you, but worked out well in this case. So this is Carefree Black Girls by Zeba Blay, a celebration of black women, which is essentially a collection of essays focusing on the black women's experience, primarily in America, as I recall, but there's a kind of list of some of the essays. And the sort of central premise is, ignore that some of the pages came out from the spine. So one of the central kind of motivators, I suppose, behind the book is the hashtag that the author came up with, Carefree Black Girls, which was about kind of redressing the balance of black women and their propensity to be forced into a position where they're always having to deal with struggle and also having to kind of bear the emotional and social brunt of prejudice and having to constantly own that ground without being allowed to be carefree. Now that phrase has been contested as the author deals with in one of the essays in the book, but it's actually really, really interesting, and I think the fact that she chose to name it that anyway and then to interrogate her own thinking is really, really interesting. So yeah, this kind of looks at many different experiences and this the kind of cultural experience of being a black woman in 2021. One of the, not just sort of on a day-to-day level, but also in terms of how representation is dealt with in the culture. For instance, there's this chapter on Cardi B is so problematic, which is really about interrogating like pop culture iconography and also asking questions about whether representation can ever be truly representative. What do we do when people who are being representative in some ways are actually problematic in other ways? Do we abandon them? Do we say they don't represent us, or do we leave space for sort of more of that kind of interrogative messiness? There's loads of stuff here about pop culture and about the body in space, as it were, in terms of, again, kind of picking up on some of those themes from Queenie, about the black woman's body, the sexualization or the agency or lack thereof, which is interesting. And also about, how that's kind of commodified, not only by white people, but other people in the black community, and so on and so forth. And what does it she says here, I highlighted a few. This is a chapter on sexuality, which I thought was really, really interesting. I would not develop a language for my sexuality that wasn't contingent on what other people felt about it. I could not desire because I believed I was inherently undesirable, which is, a cultural construction and expectation that's placed on the body. This also deals with trauma as well, so there's a trigger warning there. But it really kind of deconstructs a lot of the tropes around pop culture's obsession with and commodification of black women, and sort of goes, what if actually there are, I mean, of course there are, what if, we move away from that idea that there are only certain archetypes of black women that are allowed to perpetuate, and actually comes to view the whole experience as human. Wow, what would that be? God forbid we should all be human. And also much more highly nuanced than it's allowed to be. It also touched on colorism, which is really, really interesting. And it's really good to give over to someone who knows more about this than you do, a lot more about this, because they've experienced it on a visceral level and a visceral and human level, and being able to read that kind of level of openness is just, it sounds weird to say, but it's a real privilege to be able to read that and hold space for it. So yeah, this is really, really interesting collection of essays that I'm really glad that Instagram spied on me to suggest. So Keisha the Sket, now this is excellent. Okay, written by anonymous author Jade. I say anonymous, there's no picture or anything like that, which I believe is part of her kind of writing ethos, in the sense that she wanted to remain essentially anonymous. Keisha the Sket is a collection of, look at that beautiful artwork, of I want to say columns, but they weren't really columns. They were originally distributed on I think it was Pixo, one of those sort of early naughty sites where they were almost like blog posts, as it were, that told the story of, in the actual vernacular of the people who were writing, or rather this author writing. I'll just give an example there. Which is about this young girl called Keisha and her kind of life in London as a black woman, or as a black girl, I should say. I think she's about 15, no, she's just in college, so she's 17 at the time, but I think she started writing it when she was still in school, and apparently it just sort of spread like wildfire, and you could get it on the internet, but people would print off copies and so on and so forth. You can probably tell the font there in Korea. And so what this is it collects the whole story together for the first time, which is about her life and loves, and her experience in pursuit of her best friend's brother, who ends up becoming her partner. It's also very frank about sex and about, the sexuality, sensuality, and the commodification of that sexuality of young black girls. Again, I suppose kind of picking up a little bit on what the essay collection Carefree Black Girls did, and also on Queenie. Now, what's interesting is, so these are all the original blog posts, and then it's been also rewritten. So in the book, you also get Keisha Revisited, which kind of fleshes out the original story and retells it for, not now, because it is still firmly rooted in that period, but it goes into more detail than Pixar would have allowed. Coffee stain there, you can tell I was compelled. And it also features a collection of essays at the back. There's one there by Candice Carty-Williams, and Caleb Femi, who will come up later, and various other people. And the kind of themes the book touches on are sex and sexuality, masculinity, and how men are presented. I'll just find some more. Language, linguistics, and culture, and also music, and how, sort of like wider culture played into this kind of presentation of this young woman who about whom the story is about, basically. So this is really, really interesting, and it's really interesting to read it totally geographically located in like London. I think it's Hackney, as I recall. My apologies. Yes, it's Hackney. There we go. And what's so interesting is because it's so culturally situated and makes no apologies for that as well. It shouldn't. It's completely easy to read, though. I mean, you might be forgiven on the surface for thinking, if you're not familiar with some of the slang and so on and so forth, that it's actually quite difficult to read, but it's really not. You start reading it and you're like, yeah, this is totally fine. It really kind of reflects on black young women's experience in the UK specifically, and in London particularly, at a very specific point in history. And then what I say history, the early 2000s, but what the kind of revision does is reflect on that now and look at what's changed, if anything has changed, and if they haven't, why not? And there are a lot of, I mean, it's rough, don't get me wrong, there's an amount of sensationalism to it that does not feel unrealistic at all, but a trigger warning is it's quite rough in places, by which I mean rough to read about the abuses. There is things about sexual assault in here, and blatant disregard for agency, and so on and so forth, and I think it asks a lot of questions about masculinity and femininity, as well as being situated within the black experience. So I think this was great, and I actually recommended this for one of my students who's writing about linguistics and kind of developing languages for communicating with people using their own vernacular. That's a very complicated way of describing it, for their dissertation. So really, really enjoyed this, and I think everyone should read it. I really, really do. So finally, for what I've actually finished reading in this vlog, no vlog would be complete. Vlog should be complete, I should say. Not that I'm going to include it in everything, but without revisiting Bernardine Evaristo's Girl, Woman, Other, which, I mean, you'll have heard me talk about before as an absolute masterpiece. I know quite a few of you on the channel have read it too. I decided to revisit this and just to marvel again at the wonderful way that she tells the story of generations of black women in Britain, what that identity means, what their different experiences are, how it intersects with race, sexuality, gender identity, socioeconomic background, so on and so forth. I can't praise this enough. If you haven't read it, please get a hold of a copy. It won the 2019 Booker Prize for a reason. It shared it with Margaret Atwood that year, which I don't necessarily think was necessary, but that's a separate issue. I think this could have won perfectly well on its own. This is a beautiful masterpiece, and this paperback edition is gorgeous. So I went back and reread that, which is very rare for me. And the reason I did that as well is because Bernardine Evaristo has released their manifesto. on Never Giving Up, which is a signed copy as well, which is lovely, from Lower Stones. And this is quite a simple kind of, I'll just sit down actually, because I'm hovering very strangely there. This is kind of, well, it's what it says. It's a manifesto for life about the pursuit of what you want and how to get there, and also about how your story maps out how you navigate your way through life and pursue constantly the your sort of end goal while making space for what happens along the way. That's the kind of chapters it's split into, and it's, I'm not necessarily going to say it's a massive deep dive, because I think actually she uses the prose very sparingly, but she does share a lot of really interesting information about her life, about growing up as a mixed race woman in the UK, about you know, moving from, which I was particularly interested in because I was only dimly aware that she worked in drama and went to drama school and so on and so forth. That was really, really interesting. And it kind of traces the cultural and political climate of the time in a really upbeat way that kind of speaks to a kind of appreciation of the wider world, as it were, and an awareness of how it operates, both in opposition to and in support of both individuals and specific cultural groups. That's probably very badly explained, but I really, really enjoyed this. It's a really, really easy read, and I was really eager to get to know more about the person who, I'm familiar with Bernardine Evaristo as a person, obviously, like telly and interviews and stuff, and some of the books that I've read of hers, but I really, really wanted to get to know a little bit more about her and what her personal kind of journey was, and so this is delightful for that, and it's not that long, so, you know, if you really concentrated, you could probably do it in a day. And actually what's really interesting is reading these two against each other is kind of seeing where her experience overlaps in the experience of her characters, not necessarily where you think it might either, but what a great way to round out the vlog almost with a masterpiece I already love and lovely new discovery. So finally, to wrap all this up properly, after the false wrap-up I did with the Bernardine Evaristo novels, these are books that I have not finished yet, or actually even started, if I'm honest, but I am going to continue on with. Again, like I said in the first, or rather the opening of the vlog, what I didn't want to do was just post this for Black History Month and go, that's my work done, I don't have to bother, because that's just tokenistic and it's not cool. You know, I don't want to do tokenistic kind of, oh, this month I'll read stuff by Black authors or authors of colour. That's not what I want to do. I want to be reading it constantly from a variety of authors. So but I've got hold of these, so these are what I'm going to be reading next, which I won't be able to review in this, obviously, because the vlog's coming to an end, but picked up this beautiful copy by Femi. There he is, the angel, which is it's a kind of poetry, spoken word prose collection called Poor, which is just beautiful, I think. And obviously what it says on the blurb there is set on the North Peckham estate. Well, this is probably the best way to sum it up, isn't it? In Poor, Femi has written an ode to a troubled yet enchanted world and to the black boys raised in it. And it's full of photographs and, you know, a kind of journey through poetry, as it were. So those intersections with class and location, which, you know, as you'll know, fascinate me completely. So I'm going to get to that this week. I'm also going to get to The How by Yrsa Daley-Ward, who is my favourite author of poetry. Author of Bowen. If you haven't read Bowen, and even if you don't like poetry, go and buy Bowen. It's absolutely incredible. Follow her on Instagram, Yrsa Daley-Ward. She's wonderful. Her writing is just stunning. And this is an interesting one because it's called Notes on the Great Work of Meeting Yourself. There's the gorgeous Yrsa. And I believe it's something of a self-help book, as it were, meditations, lists and prompts and stuff. But I'm going to read it because I believe, I'm not necessarily looking for that per se, but I want to read more of Yrsa's prose because it's just so beautiful and touches on so many things with such a lightness and a way that really makes you reflect on the power of words. So I'm looking forward to that. And then finally, I literally bought this for the cover the other day because I needed something for the 2-for-1, and I was like, that's beautiful. This is Natasha Bowen's Skin of the Sea, which is apparently about mermaids, but also touches on the slave trade as well. It's a YA novel set in, I think it's the 1500s. Yeah, and there's a little content warning there at the start, which is, I think it's a good thing. I think letting people know sort of what they're getting into before they start a novel. Not that I necessarily think that should dissuade you if you think you can handle it, but you know, it is good to know kind of where you stand before you inch thick, as it were. So yeah, I'm going to be continuing on with these, and I hope you've enjoyed this vlog. Like I say, let's keep going with that. Let's keep having those messy middle conversations. Let's keep having those interrogations of ourselves, our opinions, our thoughts, our experiences, and you know, let's raise a glass to Black History Month and make Black History Month every month of the year. Because it matters, doesn't it? People matter. So there we go. I hope you've enjoyed this. Put your library cards somewhere safe for now. And until next time, keep sniffing those books and look after yourselves. Much love. Mwah.